scheduled meeting of the Fort Myers Beach Local Planning Agency. It is Tuesday, December 10th, 2024. It's 9 a.m. We're calling this meeting to order with all LPA members present. If you would please stand for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Comment. Is there anyone here who is here to speak on anything that isn't a case, a public hearing case? Okay, we'll move on then to our first public hearing, which is VAR 202-40270 for 1741 Estero Boulevard. This is a resolution of the Fort Myers Beach Local Planning Agency approving with conditions or denying variance 202-40270, requesting 6 variances from the Land Development Code for the property located at 1741 Estero Boulevard, generally referred to as strap number 194624W40080B.0010 in Fort Myers Beach, to vary from required 1. rear setback, 2. accessory structure setbacks, 3. landscape buffer, 4. off-street parking, 5. side street build-to line, and 6. parking lot entrance width to allow a mixed-use commercial development, including retail and lodging uses, providing for other clarifications as necessary, providing for conflicts of law, Scrivener's errors, severability, and providing for an effective date. This is a very, yes, Jane?
Correction, there's only 5 conditions. In the description it says 6.
So, Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I may,
Please, Nancy.
the items on your agenda today, they are quasi-judicial in nature. So if we could kind of go through our formality as we, everybody can hear me? Okay, very good. So I want to clarify that you have 4 items on your agenda today. And these items, such as zoning revisions, special exceptions, and variances, these are all quasi-judicial in nature. And this is going to require that today's public hearing comply with procedural requirements that have been established in Florida law and in our land development code. Now, these quasi-judicial proceedings, they are less formal than proceedings before a circuit court, but they are more formal than the remainder of our meeting. And they're going to follow the basic standards of due process that require certain notices, the application of the correct standards, and your decisions to be made on competent and substantial evidence that's presented to you in either written documents or through oral testimony. So your job is to evaluate the testimony and the information for each agenda item, and then draw a conclusion regarding whether the criteria in the Land Development Code or in state law, as may be applicable, has been satisfied. So pure speculation or opinion that is not based on competent facts cannot legally be considered by you in evaluating an agenda item. Testimony by professionals who are qualified as experts in a particular area has been considered competent evidence by Florida courts, as well as testimony by neighbors and residents who have fact-based information such as minutes, surveys, engineering reports, or testimony that is based on their personal knowledge and information. A unanimous decision by you today by eligible voting members of the LPA to approve a variance shall constitute final agency action, subject to a request by anyone for an additional hearing or review of the matter by the town council if that request for an additional hearing is received by the town clerk within 10 days of your decision. Testimony by professionals who are qualified as experts in a particular area has also been considered competent evidence by Florida courts. Oh, I already said that. Sorry about that. So if you intend to speak, please keep this in mind. And when you come forward, please state your name clearly for the record and whether or not you've been sworn in. So for purposes of efficiency, we would like to go ahead and take care of a few things for the record. First of all, I need to ask the town clerk if all agenda items have been properly advertised pursuant to our code and state law.
All items were noticed.
So in order to determine if we have eligible LPA members, I need to ask whether any LPA member has a conflict of interest that would prohibit them from voting on any of these items today. And if so, please disclose this for the record so we can ascertain that we have a quorum present.
John, any conflicts?
I do not.
How about you, Jim?
No conflict.
Jane?
None.
Doug?
No.
None.
What's your name?
Don said it.
Yeah. And Jim?
None.
I have none as well.
Okay, your next item is to swear in any witnesses who will be providing testimony today. So if there's anyone present, including the applicant, property owner, and staff, who intends to provide testimony to the LPA today, if you would please stand, raise your right hand, and be sworn in by the town clerk.
This is anybody who's going to speak. Okay?
Do you
No,
solemnly,
this is an attorney.
oh, go ahead. Do you solemnly swear and affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, all parties have been sworn.
Thank you all.
So Madam Chair, we are now at your first item.
I jumped the gun, but I was excited to be back. So, all right. So the first one is a variance. So if there's a unanimous vote in favor of this, it will be a final decision. Any ex parte, Jim?
None.
How about you, Don?
No ex parte.
Doug?
No, ma'am.
Jane?
None.
Jim?
None.
John?
None.
And I have none as well. Okay. So let's begin.
Did we read the title?
I did read the title. Yep. I did it before Nancy did her show.
Sorry.
You guys able to hear me?
We can hear you fine, Eli. Thank you.
Good morning, Eli Lee Planner, Town of Fort Myers Beach. The property is requesting the property owners are requesting 6 variances for a proposed mixed-use commercial building in the downtown zoning district. The site is located at 1741 Sturter Boulevard on the corner of Miramar Street. The applicant and property owners are present at the meeting to discuss the project and the 6 variance requests. And after their presentation, I will come back up to the podium to discuss the criteria for a variance and list of conditions that staff proposes.
Eli, in the package, it only has 5 conditions.
That's correct. There is 5 conditions for the property, but there's 6 variance requests.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh.
5 conditions, 6
my
requests.
fault. Misunderstood. Thank you.
Thank you, Eli. Any questions for Eli before we go? All right. Okay, if the applicant will come forward.
Good morning, Kara Stewart, for the record, representing the owners of the goods.
Ms. Stewart, before you get started, have you been qualified as an expert before this body?
Correct, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I have, and I have been sworn in. The applicant before you is asking for some very simple, what we think, variance requests. There are some that affect the rear property line. We have a property that is on the corner of Estero and Miramar, and we have a parallelogram, which inhibits our abilities in a few instances. The first request for the encroachment in the rear yard, code requires a 25-foot setback, which we meet on our principal structure. We are looking to have a generator installed above flood, which will encroach an area approximately 1 foot into the allowable area. 1 foot by maybe 2 feet. It's a very minor encroachment because of that parallelogram. The second request in the rear that we're looking for is the area we're going to use as our dumpster enclosure. Actually is attached to the building. It looks like it's part of the building, but that again will also encroach in a very small area with that parallelogram, approximately 6 feet in one location of that, not again the whole length of the dumpster enclosure. Will be screened from anything else because it is a solid wall part of the building. The access to that dumpster will be underneath the building. An additional request in the rear of that property is the code requires us to have a 15-foot landscape buffer and or a fence. What we are proposing is to maintain the fence that it currently exists on the north property's north property line's property. And what we are proposing to do is that we will take over the maintenance of that fence going forward to ensure that we have that consistent buffer at all times. We will not be necessarily landscaping as we plan to use that area for drainage. We have a letter of no objection from that property owner as well, saying that they agree to that condition since they are the only ones that are affected. So that takes care of the rear of the property, all very minor in nature. The other requests deal with Miramar Street. We're in the downtown district. As we know, we have build-to lines. We have 5 to 10 foot build-to lines. We will be maintaining that along the front of the property, along Estero, because we want to create that inviting atmosphere. We want to encourage people to be walking the streets. So we will be on that property line. The Miramar side, however, we felt it was best for the neighborhood and everyone not to build 5 foot to the road, but to pull back our building. So we're pulling it back an additional 20 feet from the 10. We're actually pulling like 27.7 or 27.9. We're asking for the full 30 just because it's inches and make it clearer and easier during construction. So we're pulling the building back. In pulling that building back, one of the other requests that are in here to try to simplify this requires a 15-foot landscape buffer along Miramar. Again, the build-to line prohibits that, but we're moving our property line back. What we're going to propose, what we have proposed is to place additional landscaping along the building to provide another softening effect to the property. We will maintain, the other request is to maintain our access from Miramar as it has always been directly into the property. That's the one that we're talking about, our access being 88 feet. We're looking for an 88-foot access as opposed to the 25-foot access to allow delivery vehicles, to allow oversized vehicles to have access to our property in order to help eliminate those vehicles going down Miramar Street. So the access point is maintaining. The parking spaces also require a variance because they are in front of the building and you can't have parking in front of the building. This unfortunate piece of property would have no place to put parking that would require a variance. So again, that's a relatively simple request. The way we are located, no matter where I place parking, you have a frontage. So the parking is along that side, again, to maintain the ability, since we are a hardware store, for larger vehicles to come in, park their vehicle without the restriction of the overhead. I should mention at this time too, that what this owner has requested to do and why our design is somewhat limited is we are choosing to comply with flood by elevating our building. We are in we are in a coastal A, which would allow us to be at grade, which might have been more encompassing to everyone. However, we all just saw what happened even with our dry flood proofing. So we are elevating the building, taking that extra precaution, which then limits some other things. So we will be elevating the building to comply with flood, which will give us our parking underneath the building. And again, limiting perhaps any oversized vehicles from accessing that area. Therefore, those parking spaces are required. That's the requests. They're all relatively together, but kind of make up 6 requests all in one. So if you don't have any questions for me, the owner is here. If you had any questions for them.
Let's start with you, Kara.
Sure.
Questions for Ms. Stewart? John, anything?
No, this time.
How about you, Jim?
The existing trailers that they're operating on now, what are the plans on? Are they going to stay there? I know we have FEMA issues, so.
My understanding is that they're trying to continue to operate. This project has been in their minds for 2 years now. They've gone through a few different approaches. We've narrowed us down to trying to ask just for some variances. We are extremely anxious to get moving forward. Therefore, we're hoping we get, the unanimous. We've already got our civil engineer lined up. So to answer the question, I believe the trailers are staying or whatever they have to do for FEMA at this time, but we're looking to move as quickly and as expeditiously as we can. Does that answer the question? or
Yeah, I guess ideally then, are you saying that they would stay in the temporary until this building and
If
structure?
Where,
is
if they're
done?
allowed to with whatever is happening with town.
Anything else?
No.
Jane?
Doesn't this back up to the concrete wall?
The new concrete wall, we have, the code again allows us to have a 0-foot setback. We've maintained a 3-foot setback to give us an ability for some maintenance and whatnot. So yes, the one sideline is now blocked by that concrete block wall.
Certainly no reason to spend money on landscaping back there because nobody would see it.
We're planning on having that as a drainage area, whatnot, pervious surfaces to kind of capture it.
How many units will be upstairs?
Right now, we've put the plan together to take into consideration parking. And we've gone to 5 units. Again, I want to remind everyone, this is not a planned development. We are dealing with a zoning request for setbacks only.
Yeah.
So we
Smart.
took the
Very
approach.
smart. Very smart.
We took the approach that let me put it out there. I don't want to mislead anyone with the 5 units.
Yeah.
We're planning on doing 5 units. However, things change, the economy, whatever might happen.
Right.
So we've gone for the 5 to accommodate our parking. We're planning on 5, but I am still in the downtown district.
Very smart move.
Doug, any questions for Ms. Stewart?
No, ma'am.
How about you, Don?
No questions, thanks.
Jim?
No, good job.
Thank you.
Does Graham want to come? Graham, come up here for 1 minute. Just come on.
Be gentle.
Oh, I am a big advocate of this guy, a huge advocate of this guy. I am tickled pink that you're here today. I am so excited that you're here today. The last time I spoke with Graham, he was in the store and we had this emotional conversation about how do you move forward after all we've been through, because we have been through a lot. I mean, you lost everything, I lost everything, and here we are, and I'm so excited for you, Graham. So what do you think if the baby Jesus looks favorably down upon you today? What do you see your timeline being? Because I think not only am I excited for you, a lot of people are. So how do you see your timeline?
I mean, as long as I'm not sure how this whole process will go, but I'm really hoping we can break ground, as soon as possible, maybe like February, March, something like
Wonderful, wonderful.
that. And then my GC says, 9 to 12 months for the build. So
Right.
possibly by the end of next year, depending on when we can get started. So
That's
Wonderful.
great.
that
That's
is the
really
goal.
great.
And as
That's
far
great.
as the trailers are concerned, I'm just kind of going through the process with FEMA and what I've been told and what,
What are they telling you?
I haven't heard anything. I mean, I got the notice, that we had to be out on the 18th and whatnot. And obviously I've discussed with other business owners in the same position. And, we've all been kind of just going through the procedures, we're not trying to do anything illegal, just trying to go through the process and buy time if possible or whatever we can do. But, if it comes down to it and I'm forced to leave, then I'll leave, it's what it is. But obviously I need to try to make money to build this building. So
Yeah, sure.
I kind of need to
Yeah,
stay
because it's
there.
not going to be cheap. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any questions for Graham?
I'd just like to say that is a public benefit when you say, I'm going to start as soon as possible and, hopefully be done by the end of the year. That is a public benefit to this community because you're a service that we can't live without. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you still going to have the key lime pies?
Right.
Of course.
Yeah, key lime pies,
It's a
Limbo.
question people ask.
Yeah, we're gonna add we're gonna have soft serve ice cream as well. So
Oh, good for you. Good for you.
that's
Any
big.
other questions for Graham? I'm happy for your family, honey.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you. very much.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, so anything else? Eli, you have anything you want to add in here? Well, I'm going to open the public comment to it, but if you want to come back up, go right ahead.
Good morning again, Eli Lee, planner for Town of Fort Myers Beach. Staff believe that the proposed mixed-use structure meets the LDC section 34-87C that sets forth the required findings and conclusions for the approval of a variance. Staff has determined that the proposed project is consistent with objective 1A and policy 1A3 in the comprehensive plan in terms of contributing to a coherent framing of Astoria Boulevard by bringing a commercial building close to the sidewalk, meeting parking requirements, and complying with flood requirements. If approved by the LPA, staff suggests the following conditions of approval, which is the 5 conditions that I stated before.
Yes, sir.
The first condition is approval of these variances does not give the applicant an undeniable right to permit approval. Development of the property must comply with all applicable requirements of the Fort Myers Beach Comp Plan and LDC in effect at the time of permit approval, except as specifically modified herein. The second condition is property owner must ensure that they adhere to the maximum FAR of 1.4, and the building does not exceed 18,370 square feet on the roof. The third condition is property owner must screen ground level parking in manner similar to that presented in the various application documents and compliant with flood regulations. Live vines on the allowed live vines as screening is acceptable. The fourth condition is the variances shall only apply to the mixed-use structure as shown on the provided site plan. Demolition or substantial damage to the mixed-use structure shall render the variances to be null and void. The last condition, number 5, is that property owner must complete visual screening that includes all mechanical equipment to obscure the public right-of-way, from the public right-of-way, I'm sorry, and from the immediate neighbors' property to help mitigate noise. That's all the conditions. You guys have any further questions for me?
Any further questions for Eli? Anyone? Thank you very much, Eli. We'll open the public comment. Is there anybody here who wishes to speak on this case? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment. Nancy, I have a question for you. So since there are 6 variances, do we need to do each one individually? Or can there be a motion for an all-in-one activity here?
Well, it depends.
Okay,
Should that motion come forward, it would be based on a presumption that all the criteria has been satisfied for each one.
yes.
There could be one in there that maybe one of you believes does not qualify under the criteria, and then that one could be pulled out. But
Okay.
I'm okay if you want to do them collectively,
Okay,
just to be explicit in the record.
okay. Is there anybody who has any issue with any of these, or would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to move it forward.
I'll second.
Okay.
What is
So
the motion?
The motion,
Yeah.
the motion is to
To
approve.
approve variances as requested,
With conditions.
with the conditions
Okay.
as outlined. Thank you.
So there's a motion to approve with the conditions as set forth in the staff report, and there is a second to that motion, which would mean if there's a unanimous vote, you're done. I'm so excited for him. Okay, is there any discussion on the motion? Look, I'm assuming you are all on my page. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing no discussion, your vote, John?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Yes!
And you're an
Okay.
aye?
I'm an aye. So
We
aye.
couldn't tell. Just-
Oh, I probably shouldn't get that excited because it's not very impartial, but I'm not impartial to you, Graham. Okay, it passes unanimously, and congratulations, Kara, and congratulations, Graham, and all your family. You move forward. Thank you very much. Oh, that was great. What a nice way to start. Let's just stop here. Okay. No.
It's gonna look great. Yeah.
All right. So that is good news for this
Yeah, I
town.
like these. For a hardware store.
Well, and you know, it's so great
We'll let
that
them
it's
celebrate
housing
for a second.
Celebration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
here we go on to the next case. We're going on to the next case. This is a special exception, SEZ 202-40240 for 2584 Estero Boulevard. Okay, guys,
Guys.
you have to be quiet now. Estero Beach Club condominium. This is a resolution of the Fort Myers Beach Local Planning Agency, another one, approving with conditions or denying a special exception 202-40240, requesting a special exception for the property located at 2584 Estero Boulevard, generally referred to as the Estero Beach Club condo. Strap number 194624W3020000.00CE to allow for the replacement repair of paver decks, pool shell and coping, cement walkways, a cement foot wash station, irrigation lines, and a fence line along an existing retaining wall located partially and entirely within the environmentally critical zoning district, providing for other clarifications as necessary, providing for conflicts of law, scrivener's errors, severability, and providing for an effective date. Jason.
Madam Chair, ex
Yes.
parte.
Yes, of course.
Mhm.
Ex parte communication, Jim?
None.
How about you?
None.
How about you, Jane?
None.
Doug? Doug?
That's done.
No, ma'am, none.
None. Thank you.
Jim?
None.
I have none as well. Okay, thank you. And go ahead.
Good morning, members, staff. My name is Jason Smalley. I'm with your Planning and Zoning Department. So today, as was mentioned just briefly, there's a request before you for special exception for the rebuild and repair of certain materials and certain structures within the EC zone. The applicants are here today to discuss a total of approximately 4,500 square feet of materials. Not all of that is impervious material. But as mentioned, this does include their pool deck, foot wash stations, and a few other impervious and planting areas that are wholly or partially within the EC. The applicant, as I mentioned, is here, and the staff will go through the findings and conditions and to ensure that they have met the minimum requirements. Are there any questions or concerns for staff before the applicant is allowed to come up and have their case?
Does anybody have any questions?
Yes. So if I understand what we're saying, we're not reconstructing we're not reconstructing things that are prohibited to be reconstructed in the floods EC the zone, right? Correct.
Yes. So without the special exception, they wouldn't be allowed to be constructed, but that is an across the board prohibition against anything. What they're looking to replace was there prior to the storm. Some of it is things like walkways. They are not repairing their seawall, for instance, but fences, anything that was destroyed by the storm.
Okay. Yeah. So the seawall is okay. They're not.
They have not requested anything to repair or replace the seawall or its cap.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? All right, thank you, Jason. Any-
Two of us.
That's good.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Michael Muirhead. I'm on the board of the Cerro Beach Club. I'm thrilled on behalf of the board and on behalf of the owners that we're thrilled to be at this meeting and have this opportunity. It's been a long haul and we're very excited. I brought Jennifer Tuggle, who's our manager with Suter, Middleton and Cox, who's been intimately involved or integrally involved with Jason in putting together the application. So if you have any questions?
Any questions for the applicant? Jim?
None.
Don?
No.
Doug?
None.
Jane?
None.
Jim? John?
No questions.
I don't have any either. Your application was well put forward and very straightforward. Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank
Thank you. And we look forward to getting started also.
Thank you.
As
Thank
soon
you.
as possible.
Thank you. We'll be excited for you too. You're welcome. Jason, any follow-up? Anything else?
I'm not sure. Should I go ahead and wait till after public?
Sure. If you want to, that'll be fine. Is there any public comment on this case? There is none. We'll close that. So go ahead.
So as part of the, again, Jason Smalley, senior planner, as part of the special exception process, there are two code sections that are in consideration, 6-366B3. So this deals with the allowance for repairs within the EC zone, and they will be grappling with LDC section 34-88B, which is the general special exception code language. As you can see in there, staff believes that they have met the requirements of that code section and are in compliance with the comprehensive plan. Are there any other questions for staff?
It doesn't look like there are any, but thank you very much, Jason.
Oh, I'm sorry. One last thing. Did want to mention that there are some
Conditions.
recommended conditions of
Yes.
approval.
Oh, yes.
Many of them
5.
are pro forma, as was mentioned in the previous one,
Mhm.
including that the structures would need new special exception should they need to be constructed in the future. Approval of the special exception doesn't grant the applicant undeniable right to permit approval. The applicant must go and get all of their local and state and federal permits that might be relevant. And that following the process and prior to closing out of the process, they will need to engage with the environmentalists just to make sure that the landscaping and lighting requirements have been met.
Very good. Thank you, Jason.
Jason, just one comment,
Yes,
if I
sir.
may. I'm sure staff had a lot to do with how this final product ended up coming to us, but it's so well done. It's complete. It doesn't leave anything to the guess or imagination. Your recommendations are clear, and so is the material provided. So good job to you guys and to the applicant, and I hope there's about 10 or 12 more like this coming right
Yes.
behind you, because this is how it should work.
It's easy.
As a personal opinion, I think I appreciate that, and that much of that needs to be directed to Sarah and to Judith. They've done.
Oh, if you pass that along to Judith, that'd be great. Thank
I
you.
will do that, absolutely.
You know, you all are a whole marvelous package for us. So we thank you. Yeah. They are. They
Thank
are.
you.
Okay. Any conversation on this, or if not, would somebody like to make
I'd
a
make a
motion?
motion to approve special exception SEZ 20240240 with the staff criteria and recommendations included.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for approval. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, your vote, Jim?
Aye.
How about you, Don?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Jim?
Yes.
John?
Aye.
Merry Christmas. Aye, congratulations. It passes unanimously, and that's a final decision vote.
No,
Oh,
no,
wait,
It's not a
no,
variance.
Oh, 10 days. Yes,
no,
but
it's a special exception. It goes to council.
It has to go to council?
Sorry.
Merry Christmas anyway. You'll enjoy the council. They're lovely people.
Let us know if you need help with those guys.
Yeah. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, next item, SEZ 20240-186, 1479 Estero Boulevard, Delonica. This is a resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, approving with conditions or denying a special exception, which will go to the Town Council, SEZ 20240-186, for use of an existing lot to provide 43 commercial parking spaces in the downtown zoning district of the Town of Fort Myers Beach Land Development Code for property located at 1479 Estero Boulevard, providing for Scrivener's errors, severability, and an effective date. Okay,
Ex parte?
yes, thank you. John,
None.
Jim,
None.
Jane,
None.
Doug,
None.
Don,
None.
Jim,
None.
I have that. Thank you, Jason.
Hello again. It's been so long. My name is Jason Smalley. I'm Senior Planner with your Planning and Zoning Department. I would like to just point out that before you are actually two requests, and staff just wants to make sure that we understand that they, for the most part, are attached together. Their first request is for the special exception. That is to open up the allowance for the applicant to actually do commercial parking, i.e. charge for parking for people that are not using their services. The second request is a package of variances that is in response to staff's rundown of the requirements of that special exception request. So when we talk about it, it's not to say that the special exception is not possible without the variances, but the applicant has requested those variances in response to staff's request to bring some of these things into compliance. So again, before you today is the initial special exception. This is according to the previously approved LDO, I believe it was from 2022. There was 43 parking spaces on site to serve a 25-unit hotel. This is an extension of the Lani Kai proper. This is 1479. So this is that structure on the north side of Estero. The applicant has requested that they would like to apply all 43 possible parking spaces for the allowance of commercial parking, i.e. to be able to rent them out on a day-to-day basis. Is it, if I may, is it, should I be talking about the variance along with this? Is that
So
relevant?
generally, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we go over your procedural rules, but generally it's staff's, at this point in the proceeding, staff is giving you an overview or an introduction, and the burden is with the applicant to show you that a change needs to be made either to their property or to existing zoning. So the burden shifts to the applicant to come forward, and then staff will come and provide you with additional information. What has happened, I think, over the years is sometimes applicants don't come to the hearing, and then staff just carries the ball. So then staff has presented initially, and then just kind of keeps going with it, and then the applicant comes up. So we're trying to make that change if you haven't already noticed that.
Yes, but are you asking about the fact that there's two cases here?
Yes, I just wanted to know if if I should go ahead and talk about them together, if we should just go ahead and talk about the special
Just the
exception.
introduction, and I think that the applicant has representation today, and then allow them to do their presentation, and then you could come back.
So deal with the special exception and then deal with the variance requests.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the introduction is that there are two.
Yes, there are two. So we'll deal exclusively with the special exception.
Yes.
So the special exception stands on its own. They're requesting the ability to go ahead and utilize all 43 parking spaces. We'll talk about the variance once we get to that.
Okay.
Are there questions or concerns right at the top here before the applicant has a chance?
Jim?
As it relates to the existing use of this particular parcel, staff's position is you don't know what it's been used for?
We're fairly confident that it is an annex, if you will. It's additional hotel units. This was expressed to us before the storm, and that's the story we've heard afterwards. So staff doesn't have any reason to believe that they aren't capable of being hotel and motel units. We cannot confirm if they are currently being used as such.
So by extension then, if everything gets turned down today and they continue to use them what they're using it for, how does staff feel about that?
I don't know that we have a feeling about it, but if
They're allowed to do that?
well, they would ostensibly need to go through the NOV process that they were involved with, and I assume that the magistrate would have some requirements at that point.
That's a good answer. Thank you.
Doug, did you have something?
Yeah, I have a question. So, the special exception is for 43 parking lots or parking spaces, I mean. But then when we get into the variances, like there's some concerns about landscape buffers and stuff like that, that may reduce the number. If we don't grant the variances, they may not be able to have 43 parking spaces. So how do we decouple that issue? Is it, if we approve the special exception, that, yeah, we're okay with them having commercial parking, period, the number of spaces to be determined?
Well, let me see if I can decouple this in my own mind. If you take the special exception on its own merits, ostensibly you would be, if approved, you would be approving the use of what is currently 43 parking spaces. Now, the staff has done the review, and we believe that the 25 units themselves require, in our code, 30 parking spaces, which means that they have 13 overhead. The next step for the applicant is to argue the variance, which we haven't gotten to yet, which they're requesting then to wipe that 100% wipe of the parking requirements. So if only the special exception were approved today, ostensibly they would be eligible for only 13 parking spaces on the site.
Okay, so if the special exception's approved, they have to set aside 25 parking spaces for the 30 parking spaces for the hotel.
Unless they can show us that they have abandoned that use there, which brings up other questions.
Which they haven't.
And that,
But that would be the maximum. But then when we get to the variances, if we find that 43 spaces total is too many for that space because they don't have the proper landscape buffers and so forth, then that's a different subject.
I think that is a different subject, and I take your point. That may not be found out until the LDO or DO stage, once rubber meets the road and we look at the dimensions. But the way that it was laid out and the way that it was approved in 2022 for the LDO, we're fairly confident that the dimensions of the spaces are correct. At that time, it was approved with the existing drive aisle widths, and I think I mentioned that in the staff report for the variances. There is
a
a
special exception doesn't guarantee them 43 spaces.
No, it's just the use. The special exception just opens up the ability to do the use in general.
For commercial park.
Correct.
Okay.
So if we granted the 47, they would have no use for that building because they would not have any parking.
So if you granted all 43 to be used for short-term parking, yes, on that site itself, it would be non-compliant. Now, there is a question, and I think this is a wider discussion that staff has had with the applicant. Perhaps it's best to look holistically at all of their parking spaces or all of their parking lots,
Yes.
come up with a total number of rentable units, total number of parking spaces, and that'll give us a total available overhead for them to use across all three parking lots. I would say that to staff is more holistic, and that might address some of the ideas of, well, how many parking spaces are on 1479 and how many are available at 1400 proper. But that wasn't really the scope of what we were doing today. I believe the applicant, when they come up here, we briefly discussed that, and they would be open to doing something like that, looking at it in totality.
Okay.
Maybe this may be, is it premature for me to make a motion to table this?
Yes, it is premature, isn't it?
Well, we haven't heard from
Anything from the applicant?
from the applicant yet, and they do have a representative present, so we should hear from them.
Absolutely.
Okay, anything else for Jason for the moment?
No.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Bob?
Thank you.
Welcome.
Happy holidays to all of you.
Merry Christmas,
Thank you.
happy holidays to you.
Okay, where to start? Lonnie Kai has three pieces of property. 1400 is the
Bob, say your
main.
name for the record.
Oh,
please.
Robert Brandt, attorney for the record, and with me is Kenny Conadaris, the owner's representative. Bob couldn't make it today, but he's alive and well.
Oh, I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah. So anyway, there's three pieces of parcels. The main hotel, the parking lot across the street, which is already properly zoned for open parking, and then the hotel across the street on the Bayside. We're going to call that Bayside Hotel. And that's the property in question. Everything, as far as I know, that property's been open to public parking since I've been on the beach in the mid 80s. We got a call from code enforcement though, and they told us that the sign out front that says open parking is a violation because it's not been zoned for an open parking lot. I'm going to refer to it as an open parking lot for lack of a better term. Met with code enforcement, met with Frank. What do you want us to do? Well, we'd like you to go ahead and get this opened up for public parking, not just for the hotel, but for public parking under a special exception. We said we'd be willing to do that, but we don't want to mess with the configuration of the parking lot because that's already been approved by the town. And we don't want to mess with the vegetation. We don't want to lose any parking spots. He said, fine. The only thing we want is we want to maintain that one lane that comes off that back street. And I forget the name of the back street.
Santos.
Comes off the back street and through the parking lot. Apparently that's the only way for a fire truck to get back through there and get out. We said, fine, we don't want to mess with the parking lot. We want to leave the parking lot exactly the way it is. So essentially, we're here for a special exception with variances that will allow the Lonnie Kai to continue to operate that parking lot the way it is, the way it's been for the last, 40 years or so, without additional expense. And if you go down there and look, you'll see that there's their parking lot here, there's the Norm's parking lot is here, and then their other hotel parking lot is here. So, and it all looks the same. Now, I agree it'd be nice to have palm trees and landscaping and grass and sculpture and a fountain and all that, but let's face it, that doesn't last on this beach very long. The Lonnie Kai spent millions after the storms, redoing the hotel, redoing the parking lots, redoing everything. And honestly, it looks like a parking lot area. I'm afraid we can't put lipstick on a, you know, the old saying. So we'd like to continue to operate the way they've been operating. Now, let me tell you how this operates. The hotel has 25 units over there. They said there's 43 total parking spots. So technically, this is a shared parking area. And technically, under the code 34.2011, if you have more than 10 extra spots, you're allowed to rent them out. You don't need a special exception. They wanted to follow the advice of the town and Frank and be good partners. So they went ahead and applied for the special exception. In any event, that hotel those rooms are less desirable because they're not on the beach. All the other rooms look at the Gulf of Mexico. So these are backup hotel rooms. What happens is when the hotel is full, then they start booking these rooms. They have a guy that stands out there. They call the guy up and they say, this is how many people are leaving. This is how many people are coming. This is how many spots we need. So we have a hands-on person there to dictate how many spots that hotel will need. Maybe it needs 0 for 1 week. Maybe it needs all 25, but they don't rent outside to outside people unless they have enough spaces there and unless they've fulfilled the phone call. So I know the code's written because it's on an average, and I know that normally when you write codes, you don't take into contemplation that there's going to be a hands-on person there regulating how many people are in the parking area or how many spots you need. But in this case, that's what happens. So they just want to make the town happy, get the special exception, leave the parking lot the way it is, operate the way it's been. We had some discussions today with staff about getting together with the other lots and trying to come up with some kind of design. I guess there's a complaint that some people just travel through Norm's and go into their parking lot. And we can address all those issues. We'd be happy to address those and work with town and with Norm and the guy across the street who's apparently now just got an empty field. But I don't think it's fair to come down on the Lani Kai at this point. And again, if we were told that if we just go back to running to hotel patrons, that we're not in violation of any codes. We wanted to do the right thing because in all honesty, occasionally somebody does come in there and want to park there and go someplace else. They would prefer that when people park there, they go to the hotel and use their facilities. But I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that, no, we haven't accepted open parking, because they have. We've restricted that since we got the letter on the code, and we've gone back to only Lani Kai patrons only to come into compliance. So that's what they're asking for. It's just to be basically continue business as it has been. And that's what all these special exceptions address. Not reconfiguring the parking lot, not landscaping the parking lot, just continuing the way it is and the way it has been. So Kenny's here if you have any questions that I haven't been able to answer
Let's
for
see
you.
if anybody have any questions for Mr. Brandt?
So is the applicant willing to add a condition that would summarize what you've just stated as far as procuring places for anyone that's in the 25 units?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We don't, when you rent a room out, you have to give them a place to park. So,
Right.
you know, that would be like cutting off our noses by the face. We want people to park there. We're trying to help the town too. I mean, yeah, it's a motivation to get $20 or $10 or somebody to park there, but it's also motivation for the city to get these cars off the road. I realize there's a lot more places to park now with all these empty lots, but they're not parking there legally. So once the town gets built back up, you're going to need more parking spots. As a matter of fact, we've talked about it. His dad and I talked about even trying to build a parking garage down there to alleviate the parking situation and I think at one time we even came to council and asked to co-partner with council. That was several years ago, but anyway, parking is needed down there. It's in a special district. So I think we have some special considerations, at least I hope we do. And I'd ask that they continue to business the way they've been doing business.
And has there been any, I guess, commitment to work with the staff on the overall parking for all 3 parcels, and then, reflecting all of the rooms on both the Bay side and the Gulf side?
Yes, and I understand the math. That may get us more than just using the 13 spaces. That may get us more I don't know, I haven't done the math with 100 rooms over here and 25 rooms over here. I can't tell you off the top of my head how many total parking spots there are.
But that might help us
Pardon me?
that may help us if we knew that there was sufficient parking, on one of the three parcels for all of the 125 rooms, which we don't have
Again,
that piece of
We would be
information.
foolish not to provide and leave open a number of spaces for the hotel guests that we know are coming in. I mean, that's just bad business. And the Lonnie Kai's been in business for 50 years now, and parking has never been an issue. They have staff at each parking lot. They have communication from the front desk to staff as to how many people are coming in that day, how many parking spots are needed. Sometimes you might need 100 spots. On another given day, you may only need 20 spots, but this is always communicated. So in the overall scheme of things, I don't know that it really matters because it's going to regulate itself. So to have these spots, they're never going to rent out to the open public if they can help it. But if somebody pulls in on a hot day and the traffic's backing up, and you just pull somebody in and say, you get to take your $10 and they park there, we don't want to be we don't want to be in violation with somebody saying, wait a minute, that person walked over to this place and not to the Lonnie Kai. I mean, we can put a sign up that says Lonnie Kai patrons only, but that doesn't mean people are going to honor that sign. But in respect to your question, yes, there's adequate parking for the hotel. There always has been. That's never been an issue. In fact, before the storm, they had a limousine that used to transport people to try and cut down on traffic. So trying to just help by having the parking lot available. But yes, we would, we're willing to talk. I like the idea of getting together with all three parcels and doing something, to help each identify and get them off the road. That would be great. But that's not part of our proposal for today.
So let me just summarize from my mind. First of all, my personal belief is parking's your problem, not ours. I know there's difference of opinions on that, but you got to figure that out as a business. So what we're really talking about is you're operating without approval, but you're operating exactly today as you will tomorrow if we approve this. Is that correct?
I think we're operating correctly under 34.2011.
Yeah.
But we're trying to accommodate the town by coming in for a special exception under 34.2019.
Except for the requirement for the buffering, the landscaping, the things that come with the normal approval for using that lot in that fashion.
That's what we're trying to get away
That's the
from.
thing we're really talking about today.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to, exactly.
Just didn't want to have it more complicated than that.
No, you're exactly right. We
Okay.
want to continue to operate the way we've been operating. $7,600 to be here today. We're trying to work with the town and say, we want to be a good partner. We don't think we need to do this, but if this makes you happy, and if this gets somebody else that's complained off your back or whatever, then, we're happy to accommodate you. But they don't want to spend another $1 million landscaping and redoing the configuration of the parking lots. Because then they've got to go back because they have an LDO. So I don't know what we do if we change it. Do we got to go back to the town and then change that?
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Brandt? Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.
Do you want any questions for the applicant?
Any questions for Mr. Conadaris?
Hi, I'm Ken Conadaris, and my parents built this stuff over 40 years ago, and basically we stopped parking across the street as soon as we got a letter saying it wasn't supposed to be. We've been putting all our employees over there, so that's where they're parking for free. Okay, so we have not collected one dime across the street since we've gotten this notice. Now, basically, how we're doing it is we're trying to go ahead and go the extra effort and comply with whatever the beach wants us to do. Since I've basically come into play, I've had an open door policy that anything that we can work with you guys, we've done. I mean, I don't know if you've seen a difference in the hotel even prior to the storm, but we've put a lot of money and a lot of effort into not staying open till 2 a.m. We've been closing at midnight because we didn't want the riffraff. We've been going ahead and priding ourselves. Well, I'm just saying, we've been trying to really kick back on doing stuff, to put a little pride back into the beach. And so all I'm trying to say is if you look at what we have palm trees, we have a lot of stuff that is existing. And we've put money into landscaping. And you know what? All that landscaping got blasted out already from the last 2 storms, which were 200 miles away. So we re-put in landscaping again just recently. So this is the second time since Hurricane Ian. So all I'm trying to say is cut us a break and realize that we're trying to work with you instead of going ahead and doing stuff outside of you.
Thank you, Ken. Any questions for Mr. Conadiris?
I do. Do you have parking set aside for all of the restaurants and the catering facility?
Yes, every day, what we do is we have our parking lot attendants come into the front desk. And our thing is we figure out how many people are in-house, how many people are leaving, and how many people are arriving. If we have a party, we set aside all that stuff, because all that stuff is first priority. Then the aftermath is what we pay for parking. Now, to tell you the honest truth, like he said, this is only for like 13 extra spots. But, with Ubers and everything else, you have to think about not everybody comes in with a car. So we go ahead and we just try to calculate. We've tried to make sure everything was legal, because I'm like, okay, so if we have 25 spots, it's automatically, but they're not taking 25 spots. Well, then maybe there'll be 15 instead of 13. So that's the only reason why we're here. But we'll always put our customers first, because in fact, if we don't have parking for them, they're not going to stay. What I mean? We always have to do that. So all I'm trying to say is we're basically here on trying to go. We work with Primo. I mean, I can call Chris right now, and anything, all the people around us I work with. Believe me, I want to have a good relationship with everybody. And I even told Jason, you can come and we'll walk the property, and if you have suggestions, we'll deal with them. I have no problem with that.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Madam Chair, may I just add a comment? I will let you know that code has been looking at some of the uses for parking along that area of Estero Boulevard. So you may see some other cases come before you for special exceptions for the same reason. I think, if you're going to go after someone, you need to go after everybody. Everybody needs to be in compliance.
Thank you, Nancy. Jason, you have any follow-up?
Thank you, Jason Smalley, Planning and Zoning. I'd just like to briefly wrap this up for my portion here and just go through the special exception findings and just have those on the record. So the staff has gone through the 6 listed requirements, and we believe that for the most part the special exception is within reason. It's been presented elsewhere on the island, but the not putting in the extra work, not doing the landscaping, not taking care of any of the internal parking, that's what staff is responding to in these findings to state that the special exception is not warranted without the additional work. So if you take a look at our recommendation, we've recommended denial on this specific issue, and our explanation of this and where it doesn't meet the code and the comprehensive plan are in that analysis. But at this point, without the additional work on their staff doesn't believe that it's correct to approve the special exception kind of as a single ask.
Mm-hmm.
Staff believes it needs to come along with the agreements for the variances.
So how do you connect the two? If you approve the first one and don't and deny the second one, then what have you done?
You've effectively allowed them to utilize 13 spaces on that site for
Without
commercial
landscaping.
parking without taking into account any of the other uses that's going on there.
Doug?
I think I'm not opposed to the commercial parking. In fact, I see it a benefit for the town. If there's extra space there, let's utilize it, and if they charge for it, that's fine. But parking's at a premium in general.
What's your feeling about
But I think we need to table this because I don't think we can decouple the two issues because I'm okay with this exception to have commercial parking. I'm not okay with all these variances. And they said we need to see a complete plan. Because I don't know what we're getting.
Just so I'm clear, what Jim said, the only variance here is that it's a landscaping, right? I mean, that's the only thing that we're saying. If we allow commercial parking for 13 spaces or whatever the spaces is, all we're saying is the non-compliance is because we don't have landscape buffers and trees, correct? Am I missing something?
There are multiple issues on the site that could theoretically be resolved. It's not just landscaping. And remember, the special exception itself doesn't necessarily call for the landscaping. It's other sections of the code, which they are then asking for variances from those particular code sections. So you, as I said to Mr. Heckman, you theoretically could approve the special exception. It would be the site as you see it today. Its use would continue as of today. They would just on paper only have access to 13 parking spaces on 1479 in particular.
The more important or cumbersome portion are the variances that
I
follow.
believe so.
Yeah. So the special exception is just like a blanket. Okay, keep doing what you're doing.
That's right.
But the details are in the second part of the hearing. So Doug, to that point, I don't know that there's any benefit to table or continue the special exception hearing. I mean, this is, I don't hear any major objections to the special exception. I hear concerns about the variances. So if we could just stay focused on the special exception, I think that would be helpful. And then we'll get into the variances in the next section and see if we can flesh out the details.
And Madam Chair, I think that's important back to the counselor's recommendation is these special exceptions are important to us for consistency, any litigation or follow through. So the more proactive we can be in getting that on the record and deal with the others, in my mind, is the appropriate sequence.
I agree with that too, Jim. Jim?
Yeah, I have a question for the applicant. If the special exception was to be approved, the staff has 7 conditions that they would like to condition the special exception on. Have you looked at those conditions and are they acceptable?
I'm smiling because yes, I looked at them. Do I recall them? No, but I do remember saying that new special exception must be applied for each time an LDO is applied for, or any structures are developed, reconstructed. I think that's standard language, so I would assume that would be okay.
Yep.
I missed one. The applicant must apply for and receive all state and local permits required for the we're not doing any reconstruction, so that I don't have a problem with it because there's no permits required. Any violation, huh? That has what?
That would cover lighting in this scenario, which is mentioned in the variance, just making sure that state permits are obtained if necessary.
Well, to the best of my knowledge, there's no plan to change any of the lighting. But obviously, if that was the case, you'd have to get the permits and provide for them. Property owner should develop a plan to engage with customers of the commercial of not less than 40 feet. Yeah, see that I don't know how he wants us to put the entrance back 40 feet into the property.
No.
I don't know if we can do that without losing space.
No.
If I may.
Yeah.
So to that point, it's just a matter of the person that's on site that would be engaging with the customer if they came onto the site would be 40 feet back from your front property line. You wouldn't be losing any parking spaces. It's just a matter of we want that first contact and that first place where people are going to stop
Off the road.
to
Off the
leave
road.
off the
Right.
road.
They gotta be able to
Stacking
pull in.
distance.
We can make this real simple. All he has to do is meet with me, show me what needs to be done. We'll do it. I mean, I'm
Yes.
very easy to work with.
Ken, we know that, but it has to be on the record.
No, I know,
so
and I'm just letting
he
you know
can't
that.
just come in, but
Okay,
that's
but-
good to know.
Yes.
That's good to know.
Again, in all my years down here, which is 50, 60 years, I've never personally seen a backup that was caused by people pulling in and out of any of those parking lots.
Oh, come on, Bob.
No, I mean, the
Bob,
backup is there and
Bob,
it's there. You just.
You don't want to go down that
line.
path.
Don't just,
Don't get in that turn lane. Huh.
I
All
can
right, I'll
tell
let
you
them
how
go.
many times
I'll
I.
win that one.
Yes.
Bob,
I'll
Bob,
give you
could
that
you
one.
look at the next one, the drive aisles? I think that one actually might.
I don't know. You got to be patient when you come to the beach, especially that area. If anybody that's in a
That
rush
could
is
be a
trying to
new
get
thing.
anywhere.
That'll be a new thing on your sign.
That's
You
why I
gotta
moved to
be
the north
patient.
end. Down there, it's nice and peaceful. I don't have to deal with the back of it. Anyway,
But anyway,
two-way drive aisles must meet. I don't know if they're, again, we're not willing to do anything that's going to lose any parking spots. So in answer to your question, if this doesn't lose any parking spots, we're fine with it.
But
And it says an applicant must obtain an approved lighting plan as an outlined. And again, we didn't have any plans to do any additional lighting. I think there's adequate lighting there. Has
Bob, the
anybody
point
checked?
is, these are conditions.
These
If
are
you're
conditions of approval.
not
you're
willing
okay
to
with
do it, then you can't do it. So it's not like we don't want to do anything, we want to keep it just as it is. That's not an option. These are conditions of approval. And if you aren't in agreement to do them, then take away the ask.
I gotta ask.
If I may,
Hold on. Judith?
sorry, we added that condition in there about the fire department approval. It's not really optional. It has to be approved by the fire department, in any condition.
That's everywhere, anywhere.
Right. So we added in there just for clarity purposes that this is going to be passed by the fire department. It has not yet. And if the fire department has any issues, that changes.
They're going to win that conversation.
Right.
That's
I
right.
think so.
Always.
If we keep that lane open, that was the only thing they wanted. But remember, there was in 2020, I think an LDO was applied for. So I'm assuming that was approved by the council and by the fire department, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
So yes, in answer to your question, the boss says he'll take whatever the conditions are.
Great. Perfect. There's 7. Thank you, Bob.
Well,
Okay. Any other discussion on this? I'll open the public comment. Is there any public comment? Oh, masses. Okay, there's none. Jason, anything final?
No, I believe I went over.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Any conversation, any discussion on this? And if not, may I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve special exception SEZ 202-40186 for approval with the 7 conditions set forth by the staff.
Second.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jim. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing no discussion, your vote, Jim?
Yes.
Jim?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Doug?
Nay.
Jane?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And I am a yes. That is 6-1 in favor of the special exception. That will move on to the town council. We'll move on to the next item, which is the variance request. And that's VAR 20240-233 at 1479 Estero Boulevard, Delaney Kai. A resolution of the Fort Myers Beach Local Planning Agency approving with conditions, or denying a variance 20240-233, requesting 4 variances from the Land Development Code for the property located at 1479 Estero Boulevard, generally referred to as the Lanikai, strap number 194624 W40060B0070 in Fort Myers Beach. 1. Waiving the required parking for the 25-unit hotel requirements. 2. Parking lot configuration. 3. Landscaping requirements. And 4. Driveway width reductions for entrances on Estero Boulevard, providing for other clarifications as necessary, providing for conflicts of law, Scrivener's errors, severability, and providing for an effective date. Is there any ex parte on this? John?
No.
Jim?
No.
Jean? No. Doug?
No, ma'am.
Don?
No.
Jim?
No.
Okay. I have none as well. Jason?
Jason Smalley, Planning and Zoning Department. So as we briefly mentioned before, this is the companion to the previously discussed special exception. The applicant has requested 4 specific variances, or 4 variances to specific sections, but it encompasses quite a few things on the site. I'm going to briefly go through those. The first one, again, is to remove any of the parking requirements associated with the 25-unit hotel. They are asking for a variance for lighting within pedestrian and vehicle areas. So those they have different standards, and in general, on a new parking lot, you would be required to provide a taller light for drive areas and a slightly shorter light for those areas deemed to be pedestrian. They are requiring, or they're also requesting some changes to the internal movement on the site. In general, the code calls for anywhere that has a final final dead end, if you will, at the end of a parking lot, to account for turnaround area and for two cars to be able to back out safely. This would also encompass things like additional drainage up and above what currently exists on the site, the landscaping. They are also requesting a variance to the drive width. This is a fairly minor issue, but this was the code limits the driveway widths along Estero to no more than 25 feet. I believe this also came up in the previous variance package for the goods. So they're requesting that. According to our staff analysis, one of the entranceways is approximately 30 feet wide. So that's what triggered this one, but relatively minor in the other asks. And then lastly, this was the issue of the drive aisle widths. The applicant previously stated that they were approved for an LDO. At the LDO phase, if you're doing a reseal and restripe, generally it doesn't require a radical change of the site. It's really meant to just kind of keep what was there and keep it active and usable. But now during the special exception process, this is when these things would generally be required to be provided on the site. So they're asking for a deviation, or excuse me, a variance to the lane widths, which is in our code at 22 feet. With that said, I believe the fire department does have a little bit of wiggle room, dependent on where their fire plug is and what apparatus they intend to use. So ultimately, our point here is that any approvals today would still run up against fire department, and the fire department could allow them to use the current 20-foot wide, or they could request that they provide the full 22-foot width. And at that point, it may be necessary to reassess whether those parking spaces that are affected by that will continue to be compliant. But at today's state, we do not know until they've actually gone through a fire review, which would be a couple steps after this if approved.
Okay, questions for Jason on the first round through here? Thank you, Jason. Mr. Brandt?
Money, 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 spending more money. Money's not there, folks. Ian, Helene, Milton took care of that. We've got an LDO. The fire department approved it. I promised Frank that we would keep that drive fire lane through there. What they're asking us to do now is going to break my promise because we can't configure it and keep that lane there. We're going to lose space. I don't know what else to say. I mean, the parking lot's been there. It's operating. I don't have a problem with moving the guy back 40 feet.
Well, hold on. Are you referring to number 4?
I'm referring to all of them because the reconfiguration of the parking lot it just can't happen. It's just more money, drainage we're talking about, lighting we're talking about. I mean, how much weight can you put on these businesses? I mean, they survived 3 storms, and now we want to reconfigure this and reconfigure that. This has worked. I mean, why fix what's not broken? There's nothing wrong with the way the parking lot is engineered now. The width of the driveway's been that way. If you want us to move the guy back 40 feet, I don't have a problem with that. But the rest of the stuff that involves spending money, reconfiguration, drainage, landscaping, I don't think any of that is necessary. And that's just me speaking. But again, they're trying to come into compliance, and all of a sudden we're throwing this monkey on their back to do all these things. And we said from the very beginning, when I met with code enforcement, I met with Frank, we're not willing to spend that kind of money on reconfiguration. I told them right up front.
Well,
Oh,
then
no,
why
no,
are
don't
you
worry
here?
about it. Huh?
Why are you here asking for this then?
Because they want to be good stewards. They want to be good citizens. My recommendation was not to, because I think they're in compliance with the code but just to be on the safe side, They wanted to make sure that they didn't have any problems or issues with people pointing the finger at them and saying, "Oh, there's Lonnie Kai again, they're operating illegally." So we had a meeting, we sat down and we discussed all this, and we pretty much were assured, "Don't worry about it. It's just, it's just a matter of routine." I said, "Okay, I should have known better." But so no, we're not willing to do all this stuff. I mean, we don't even know what all this stuff is going to cost. I mean, that's like opening your
Yes, it is.
checkbook up. If they want new drainage,
Hold on one second, John.
May I ask a question? So there's the letter from the town, November 10th, 2023, talks about restriping the parking lot. And in that letter, there is some reconfiguration of the parking lot. There's some parallel parking that's been moved, et cetera. Is this the plan that we would be approving?
yes, the plan that was previously approved by the town under the LDO is the plan that we want to keep in effect.
Which includes removing the parallel parking to accommodate a wide enough driveway. Is that?
Whatever it said in
That's what it's-
2023.
That's
I mean,
what it says.
restriping, no, that's not a big deal. I don't think they have a problem doing that. But when we start putting in I don't even know why they need new drainage, but I just don't want to open that door to say that when we go to get the permit, then we got to do all this. Money's, it's not there.
Was your question answered, John?
I believe so, in that the design, I've heard two conflicting things.
That's the
One
problem.
was, one was that we're going to keep it exactly as it was and continue the use, et cetera. However, a previously approved for the restriping of the parking lot said there was going to be some reconfiguration.
It's already been done.
So that's been completed. Okay.
Ken, hold on.
Yeah, that's was going to be my response. To best of my knowledge, that was already done. But if you want to hear,
Ken, come on up, please, just so you're on the record.
Yeah.
Ken Canadaris. And it was already done. We already restriped. We already had that done. It's
Okay.
already been applied,
So it would be putting it to those conditions.
What's already,
What's already there.
exactly, it's
Okay.
existing already, yeah.
You've
We already
clarified it
changed
for me.
that, yeah. we
Thank
already
you.
changed that.
Yeah, I feel like the conditions are already potentially met, or at least what I'm hearing from Ken. So I'm just trying to figure out why the money, it doesn't sound like the lighting's already in compliance. I think if I remember right, it's turtle compliant lights.
The
and-
lighting, yes, we deal with Chad with the lighting a
Right.
lot. So whatever, and that's what I'm trying to say. It's minor things are easy. We need to put a palm tree or two. What I mean? But but like Bob's saying though, to go from 20 feet to 22 feet or the reconfigurate the whole thing that we can't do. But we can go ahead and have him come down and meet with me and say, okay, I want a light here or a light there. That's easy.
Yeah, the point is if you're in compliance with an LDO and you've already restriped and you have lighting, then you're not going to do anything. You're not changing
Exactly.
anything else.
Yes.
I think is
Hold
what I'm
on.
hearing.
Do you agree with this, Jason?
So I take your point, but am I on here? Hello?
No.
It's not.
And that person's looking at their phone.
So I don't think it's correct to say that they are in compliance with lighting standards, because the lighting standards in today's code, if we were to apply it letter of the law, as I mentioned before, requires much more lighting than they have. It's going to require lighting of different heights. For most of this area, I don't believe much of it is actually pedestrian area. So they would have to have 15-foot light poles on that site. And so they would have to have some number of that. And a photometric analysis would tell us how many light fixtures would be necessary to cover that entire lot. So under the LDO, they effectively had a non-compliant site, but it was an existing non-compliant site. And the reseal and restripe is something that's meant to bring the site up to the greatest extent possible. And I'm assuming at that time when that review was done, the site is what it is. They're just coming in for something fairly de minimis under a reseal and restripe. We're not going to ask them to completely redesign the site during this process.
Oh, Lord.
So I got one follow-up
Go
question.
ahead.
So So are they in compliance with,
Yes,
with
that's the question.
well, are they in compliance for what the use was before the storm and through the LDO? That's my.
I don't think we know what the use was. On paper,
Oh.
the use was just for their own 25 person or 25 unit hotel.
Okay, I don't think it was, but I'll accept that. So if we, what you're saying is if we grant, if we allow them to do what sort of they're doing, they're going to need new lighting because they're going to meet new requirements. In other words, if you ask me to be compliant, then I'm going to ask you to do new light poles and okay.
The full landscaping. It probably has a redesigned turnaround areas. Yes.
Okay.
So is code enforcement, could I have the owner come back up for a second? Is code enforcement come to your property and indicated you need to come into compliance with these 4 or 5 things? Or they're saying, get this formally documented the way you're operating today? What have you been told?
No, that's everything. We've stayed compliant. As a matter of fact, we've met with Chad multiple times because of the fact when it used to be, there was things blocking the view of the turtles and they're gone now.
Right.
So now that is just all beach now. And so so Chad asked us, okay, do this. And we've done it. So everything, in like I tell him, if you come down and you say, okay, maybe you need to do this within reason, what Bob's saying, yes, we'll do it. I have no problem. But I don't know about like 15 feet poles and all this stuff. I mean, obviously, because then Chad might have a problem. I mean,
That's all fine and well. What am I missing? I don't know why we have this.
I don't either.
I don't either. There's a
Judith?
document for the council?
Right.
Judith Frankel, just to explain a little bit about the process. So, because we were told that there was no previous special exception or agreement for the commercial parking lot use. So they've applied for the special exception. We're treating it as something new. I know that they've stated that that's on paper, what we have on record, this is a new use. So when something new comes in, we ask it to meet current code. And so that's why you're seeing all of these variances. They had the parking lot, they had the hotel, none of that is changing. And what they're saying that they had an approval. We don't have a record of that. So we're treating this as something new. In terms of lighting, there's 2 different lighting requirements here. So there's the turtle, but then there's general for a parking lot. So, and that's for safety. And that's why you're seeing those. So they are, they do not have the lighting that if they were coming in for something new, which is how we're treating this, because that's how it is on paper, they would be required to put in, the light poles for visibility at night and those kinds of things. And that's why you're seeing the variance request. I think that perhaps that there was some misunderstanding or miscommunication when they came in for the special exception. The special exception for the commercial parking lot is not that big of a deal, but now because we're treating it as something new, then staff went and we reviewed the code. Okay, so does it meet all of these things that we require for parking? And the answer was no.
So Judith, in
which is
dealing
why
with
you're
them,
seeing-
is it your belief they thought they were just papering as per the town's request, what currently exists? Did you inform them that this is a start over?
Yeah, so this is a whole do-over.
I don't think Jason was a part of that initial
Yeah.
meeting. And as Nancy has stated, there's been this kind of push to get everybody into compliance with these commercial parking lots kind of across the board. So I don't know exactly what was explained to them in that process, but that should, because applying for a special exception, it starts the things. So that's why you have all of those variance requests there to go
Judith,
along with it.
with no disrespect meant, and you all know that nothing, this is no, you guys. But if what Nancy said, that this is going to be an across the board compliance action for all of these lots that are coming in, sorry, Jane, then they all need to be treated equally, whether they existed for 50 years or whether they're brand new. They need to be treated equally. And I think everyone would probably agree with that. But
Except, can I add, it has to be on a case-by-case basis, however,
Right.
because the facts may be different, although there's
And you
a
have different
concern.
ownership too.
Well, yeah, and if there's a concern that we have some unpermitted uses going on Estero, but each one is different, we'll have different lighting, we'll have,
Right.
trying to bring them into compliance.
It just seemed like a sad day to me to put pre-existing high-end operators, totally good attitudes and complying with the town through this process. The ones we deal with are the ones we should be dealing with. This just seems arbitrary and unnecessary in a lot of ways. So I feel bad that we're putting them through it.
But I understand why staff.
Oh, I
did,
do
so I
too.
understand
yes,
the process.
I understand the
get that.
process
Yeah.
completely.
Okay.
But it just seems like they are here asking for variances that they are not willing to accommodate. So
Is there a grandfather?
why is the request being made? That, I guess that's where I'm finding the big glitch.
Like
If
this-
this is an application
Yeah.
from the
Like the
From the
special
Lani Kai.
exception is basically giving them to do what they did, right?
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
we did that. I don't
And that
understand
should
the
be the
second
end of
part,
it.
right?
Yeah, that should be the end of it.
So
If I may, look, they didn't want to just have 13 parking spaces, which the special exception would leave them with. And that's really what triggered this. When we're looking at it holistically, yes, we have to look at the landscaping, the things that should be applied to everybody else. But that was the reason that I put the previous approval for Norm's parking lot in there. I wanted to give you an
Yep.
example of previous administrations had done that, had asked of Norm, for instance, to do the landscaping, do a
Fence,
fence, stormwater plan. I'm not saying that we need to completely copy what was done there. And quite honestly, that stuff is now out of date, 15, 20 years later. I was just providing the fact that we've done it before. This is an adjacent lot. Perhaps we either need to look holistically, which would probably involve code changes, or we need to look at what was approved before and make a decision about, is that still relevant today?
Yeah, I'd like
Or we
to,
can just approve these variances.
I'd like to.
Has there been any attempt to get Norm to comply with the plan that was approved?
Norm's parking lot?
Yeah, you have Norm's approval in there. There's a concept plan.
No, that's the approved plan.
Well, has it ever been implemented
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, when I first got
with
here, I had,
all, with all that vegetation?
there was vegetation there. Unfortunately, in the course of the 3 storms, it's been taken out. In fact, in between Ian and Helene, I
Well, is
believe
there
he-
any attempt by code to get it in compliance then?
I think that's more of are we doing the entire island because we can't just single out one person?
Yeah.
And that's more of an enforcement question.
Yeah.
Okay, hold
Yeah.
on one
Very
second.
careful.
Right.
Doug, what's your comment?
Yeah, so here's how I'm kind of sizing this up. The special exception, as a standalone thing, is simply to allow 13 commercial parking spots, correct?
Correct.
But what they're really asking for is 43 commercial
That's
parking
correct.
spots.
Correct.
So if they want 43 commercial parking spots, I think they need to comply with our codes. If they're okay with 13, fine, do what you're doing. But if you want 43, it's a new project. That's the way I look at it.
Let me just clarify something that Mr. Dunlap said. This all started with a violation and a notice of hearing because there was a sign out there that said parking $10. We met with code enforcement. We listened to their issues. We said, we'll limit the parking to Lani Kai patrons only. They said, fine. They withdrew the complaint, the violation, and we're in compliance. They said, help us if you went and got a special exception so this parking lot could have more open parking. Again, I believe that because it's ancillary to the hotel under 39.2011, that you can lease those spaces out without any approval. But anyway, they came back to the special exception. The 13 parking spots, in answer to your question, I mean, how do you regulate that? You're asking for something that's unenforceable. So why would we have all
Honey,
these?
we're not asking for anything.
Yeah.
We're-
We're not-
Let me-
We're not the ones asking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, but I'm saying that how do you enforce that? How are you gonna have somebody count how many who's parking?
That's also not our.
I understand, but I'm
yes.
just, Judge Anderson used to always say there's two sections of the law. There's the law and there's the reality of the law. Let's not get bogged down in technicalities. They want to continue to operate the way they've been operating. These variances, if you want us to agree to 13, I don't know if that was in the special exception. Was that part of the the approval? Was it we're limited to 13?
It's the difference. It's what you have open for
Okay, so if we're limited to that, why are we even discussing these? In answer to your question, did the special exception limit us to 13?
Who's on first?
I know.
I don't know if this is how I'm distilling it. Whether I'm correct or not, I don't know. But I believe there are 43 available parking spots.
Correct.
By code, 30 of them have to be assigned to
hotel.
the hotel. So they can do with the 13 as they choose today, all day, without anything happening at all. The only thing that's triggering in my mind the need for variances is if they want to apply the 30 that are supposed to be reserved for the hotel to general open commercial parking.
That's correct. That's just
That's
what
how
Doug
I-
Yeah,
just
that's the way I
said.
look
Right.
at it.
Yes.
And I would offer,
And in order to do that, I don't think they're willing to open their checkbook out
Understood.
without knowing
Yeah,
exactly
no, we
what we're
understand
not.
that.
yeah, we got that.
We understand that.
But let me ask you this, aren't you going to have revenue from 43 parking spots that helps pay for some of this stuff?
Yes, there'll be revenue from the parking spots.
If you're not willing to do that, then you should pull this.
Then we should
Because
what?
Withdraw.
You withdraw
Withdraw it.
this. You should withdraw this request because all of these variances pertain to the total use of that
Right.
lot
That's it.
for open spaces. It starts with, hey, we want to use all of it for
We
paid
want the
parking.
availability to use all of them legally.
And because of that, that's
Yeah.
what triggers all
Right.
of these variances. If you're agreeing, hey, we'll take our 13 extra spots and those are the ones that we'll do.
I don't
Then-
think we'd be foolish to agree to something we don't know the number on. I can't tell you, I don't know what lighting. Again, I lived at the north end for over 20
No,
years. They used to
no.
turn their
He's
street
saying the
lights off
number of
during turtle
spots.
The
season.
number of
So why are
spots.
we
Yeah.
worried about lights and a?
We're only talking about the number of spots.
That's right.
If
That's
they're
right.
short, then we can continue this and they can come back and tell us exactly what we need to do.
Okay, that's fine.
Well, I think they need to come with a plan for
Absolutely.
the parking
I
lot and
couldn't
show it to
agree with-
us.
I couldn't agree with you more. So thank you
While
very much.
everybody
Bob.
else is out of compliance, you're gonna make somebody come in? I don't get it.
Well, if we're making new parking lots comply with our
Bob,
code,
this is all
this is a
triggered
new
because of
project.
your
All right, well,
request.
I guess then we can
I
either
think-
continue to get the numbers and they can tell us what it's gonna cost to do this, because I don't know the specifics. How many
But
lights?
if they went away after you put the sign down, operate as you've been operating, pull the request.
Technically,
Then you're done. You got a special
Yeah,
exception.
yeah,
to do it.
technically, I said at the very beginning, I was not my advice necessarily to do this. They wanted to do the right thing. They spent the $7,600 to file all this.
Bob,
They
may I
spent,
ask you a
paid me to
question?
do all this.
Would you like to withdraw your request or would you prefer that the LPA gives you the courtesy of continuing or tabling this to a date uncertain?
I think we need to table it, talk about it, see what it's gonna cost to come. to
It will
compliance.
save your reapplication.
13 spots, it just stays.
Exactly.
Wait,
That's-
don't
that's
talk
the way-
off the record. Bob, this is
Let
your.
me do this. Let's continue it. If you, I would, then I can talk to my client and we can figure out what we're gonna do.
I think that's a wise move. May
So
I have a
moved.
motion? Thank you.
Second.
So this is the motion
Is there
on
public comment?
we already did that. We're back, that's
Sorry.
long gone.
Are we doing it to an open-ended or a date certain?
Date uncertain. Date uncertain. It will be for them to
It's up
bring
to
back.
them to
So the
raise.
motion is to continue this hearing to a date uncertain. There's a second. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Can I, now, so the special exception was granted,
Correct.
13 spaces. If we do nothing more, they can do the 13 open
Correct.
spaces.
Right.
Okay. And I don't, and there was
And you can
one.
withdraw.
I would
nay
quit
on that,
selling
so
right
they
now,
have 10
Bob.
days to
Yeah.
appeal it
Yeah,
at the time?
No, that would only be for a
That's
variance.
full.
Okay, so
The
so I
special
don't have to do
exception-
anything on the special exception?
Yes, you have to go to the
You
town
have to go
council.
to town
It still goes
council.
to town council.
Yes.
I thought they had to apply
Yeah.
10 days to town council,
That's
No.
a variance.
only the variance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Okay,
variance
so
would
do I
be
have to do
finally.
anything else? apply to anybody else or fill out any more paper.
Well, I would call Santa or somebody because I think you need that help. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, guys. Nice to
Thank
see
you.
you, Kenny. Merry Christmas to all of your family.
Jason, I take back everything I said earlier.
Can I ask a quick question? Can I ask a quick question of Jason, just for education? I can ask after, I guess, but maybe other. If they charged for each parking spot for each room, it's not a commercial lot, right? Because they're getting it, their patrons are paying for that spot, right?
Right.
Because a
There's
lot of
a one
hotels
space
charge
to-
for parking.
Yes, they do.
See what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So they could charge people staying at the hotel. They wouldn't need anything.
No.
A parking fee, right? Okay. Clear. Thank you.
Okay. Please, Judith.
These are things to keep in mind when we get to the review of the land development code. Because, and to Nancy's point of considering each thing individually, I hope you will moving forward when you see some more of these.
Absolutely.
A hotel has a unique ability that a condo building necessarily wouldn't have
Sure,
to
of
review
course. Be
their
flexible.
availability each day,
Right.
to have the staff to go out. They
Right.
can put, time tags on the cars. And
Right.
I completely agree with the applicant saying that they need to provide the parking for their, and so, you might want to consider whether a special exception is appropriate for a commercial at a hotel, because to your point, some of them charge for parking
Right.
anyway.
Right. Yeah, and it's in their best interest to keep spots for their patrons.
Yeah.
So
Okay, thank you, Judith. All right, so we will move on, finish with all of those public hearings and go on to our administrative agenda, which are the LPA guidelines. I do not have my notes.
I need a 5-minute.
Yeah,
break.
me too.
Oh, okay.
Please.
After all that excitement, we're gonna take a 10-minute break.
Pretty wound up on this.
Yeah.
New J name.
Thank you, Josh. Okay, next item on our agenda are the LPA guidelines. Nancy?
Thank you. So we had announced at a prior meeting that we would be reviewing them today. And I thought I was asked to simplify them, so I took out a lot of extra information. And I just wanted to go through them and kind of highlight for you what's in there that I felt was important to remain or take out. If you want to join me on page 248, we could get started there. My first comment is that although these are procedural rules, they really are more of guidance to you. And you do have the opportunity to waive any of these rules in a particular situation. I think to give up that flexibility really is not advantageous. In our opening remarks, you often hear me say that these quasi-judicial hearings, they're less formal than a circuit court, but they are more formal, and the degree of formality is really in your discretion. And I think you all have handled it in a very professional way, ensuring that the applicant whose property rights are at stake has a fair hearing, fair and impartial decision makers. We'll talk more about that too. The thing that was added was there are a number of sections in your code of ordinances, or excuse me, your land development code, that already address what you do and what you don't do and your qualifications. So it's really not, it doesn't provide any benefit to go ahead and regurgitate those in there. So the reference there is simply to make you aware that you do have code sections. And then again, the ability to waive. And then also, there's not going to be any challenge if for whatever reason, based on the case that's in front of you, the right thing to do, as you heard the attorney say today, is to allow something that maybe the letter of the law of your rules would prohibit you from doing. Again, as long as there's fundamental fairness, I'm not going to raise any concerns as far as your quasi-judicial hearings. Next on page 249, the training, we just took out policy and procedures or other, that's just some extra information. But the election of the officers, we want to follow the same procedure that town council is following. And it's basically announcing your vote, having the tabulation and verifying that tabulation, and then having the person appointed or selected. The issue of if you could nominate yourself, yes, you could. And then also having the LPA member present is important as well. So if you get nominated for something, maybe not just chair and vice chair, but if you guys decide you want to create some kind of ad hoc committee, I'm not saying do that, but you know, that person has to be there to kind of oversee it. So the next couple pages, there's really not too much there. The public notice is on page 251. That's just basically you know, what your code requires and Florida law requires.
You can read.
Question on public notice for a second. Council?
Yeah, please interrupt me
Sure.
as we go through this.
I have no problem with that. Thank you. On occasion, it seems like more than seldom, people indicate that they're not getting those postcards that go out. I assume that is a complimentary notification versus the formal notification. In other words, them not getting that themselves or representing that has no standing as to whether or not they were properly notified if the publishment and the advertisements have been done according to the statutes.
I don't know what your code requires right offhand. I defer to Judith. Do you know on the noticing? I do want to point out that there is a difference between noticing and advertising.
That's what I mean. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the advertisements for certain items is the publication in the newspaper.
Sure.
The noticing is basically the card that gets mailed.
Okay. Thank you.
And by complimentary, you meant courtesy.
That's what I meant. Yeah,
But
thank
we do, if someone argues, I didn't get the notice, we have tabled or
But if they
continued before.
come, then
Oh,
they
yeah.
did get some kind of notice. And I think there's actually some case law to that effect, that your notice argument, if you show up at the hearing.
That's actual notice, then.
Yeah.
You're here.
Yeah,
I,
exactly.
I agree, but
I
we
didn't get
still have
notice, but I'm
continued.
here, you know, so, yeah, and a
Yeah.
continuance is,
Right.
is fine. And I think the addresses are pulled from the property appraisers.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I was gonna add. So it's pulled from the property appraiser's record, so if it's not necessarily going to the specific address, it might be going
Their
wherever
mailing
the,
address, right.
the registered.
Mhm.
So that can sometimes be, if the property owner has not given the most current address, maybe it went someplace else and then had to get forwarded.
Yeah.
That
As long as it's properly advertised, it's
Yeah.
enforceable.
Okay, on page 252, I think the biggest concern there is possibly the meeting preparation. I think we have done better as far as trying to get you your packet earlier. We will still have a goal of at least a week, but
It's been
unfortunately.
fantastic.
Really where's Amy? We'll make sure she knows about that. It's just been very challenging because of the multitude of meetings. When you have special meetings, big special meetings, just gathering everything. But we do all work as a team and try to get that accomplished. Let's see. Okay, anticipated absences. Page 253. I just wanted to point out that I would recommend that you limit any type of communication among yourselves. I know that you're probably calling just with holiday greetings or what did you think of that football game? But the telephone logs don't really say what the context of the conversation was. And if there is an issue that comes up, what would be requested is the telephone logs, which shows that, you know, there were numerous conversations and, you know, how much can you talk about football? Maybe a lot, maybe a little, I don't know. But, so my recommendation is that when you do feel like you want to convey something like the idea that you are going to be absent, that it flows through the town clerk. And-
Switzerland.
Yeah, Switzerland. I've renamed Amy as town clerk. She's neutral. And also, it seems that your rules did provide that absences. Yeah, well, there's a notification requirement, but also that it would be a vote of the LPA, which we would do at the beginning of the agenda. And when the clerk knows, first of all, the clerk is going to try to find out if we have a quorum present. And if she does know in advance that someone is going to be absent and request an excused absence, we can go ahead and put that at the top of the agenda near the roll call.
I think we ought to call that the Don Amendment.
Yeah, and also a very good point, Jim. As far as, you know, if you are going to be absent and require the use of remote participation, if we know in advance, again, we as in the clerk, she can go ahead and put a line item, you know, request for remote participation, and then it's in the minutes in the record. So, okay, so at the bottom of page 253. So as needed, the chair at the request may appear before town council and present information discussed at LPA or otherwise requested by a vote of the LPA. I think the other language that was in there basically said that each time you're going to be doing that. Again, this is making it just a little bit more discretionary on your part if you'd like to visit with the town council and present. Meeting procedures on page 254.
Nancy, could I touch on that for 1 second? You know, historically, there have been times where, let's use a case like Seagate. It wasn't a unanimous vote. There have been times historically where the LPA chair would go to report to the council, and the dissenting vote person would also make their comments. I am not a fan of that. because I believe that whether you've won or lost the vote, you are part of a team, and it's the team prevails always. So even if I had been on the losing end of that vote, and I went to the town council, I would only report the winning vote. So does anybody object to that? I mean, if there was something, for example, if there was something that was brought up that was really well discussed or whatever, that was a topic, that, like, but this was brought up, that would be included. But that's just my opinion. And as the chair, that's how I would present it, unless you all
Well,
want me to
council
say-
may ask too, right? They
The
may say,
council may
we noticed
ask.
there were 2 dissenting votes. Can you explain?
They may ask.
Yeah.
They may ask.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to mention is we actually sent Pat one time to council,
Mhm.
and then you and I went one time, but we weren't, like, I wasn't the dissenting vote. It
No,
was
no,
just to
no.
talk
We just
about a
went,
subject. Yeah.
to the same thing.
We also now have YouTube and all the records that are live, and you can
Exactly.
watch not only the decision,
Yep.
the development of that decision.
Yep.
The minutes will never be able to characterize that, so I think that's
Very helpful. Okay.
So in the future, I mean, I enjoy working with all of you, but down the road, some of you may turn off or whatever. We may have new faces here, and
Run for the town council.
that may not be, the case. And if there's heavy debate and argument here, I could see a scenario. Maybe I'm thinking of another city where I saw this happen, where somebody, a proponent and an opponent, goes to the governing body, and then they stand at the podium and they begin the debate again.
Yeah. No.
The concern that raises in my mind is the sunshine, because there is sometimes, in some circumstances, there can be a motion for a reconsideration, which means that the matter does come back to you.
Right.
And so even though at the time that they're speaking, it's not foreseeable at that moment that it's coming back to you, but it might. So in the event that any 2 of you decide that you do want to go to the council meeting and you are going to make comments, I would ask that you notify the clerk, so that she could provide the notice, and then we don't have any sunshine issues.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yes.
So if you want to go as Jane Plummer citizen,
And that doesn't exist anymore. Remember when we had to deal with this with Gar Reynolds?
okay,
When you
going back.
It is going back, but this maybe Nancy, you're going to opine differently. For me to stand up or Jane or any one of us to stand up at the podium and say, I am not here as a member of the LPA. I'm here because I live on Jefferson Street. It sounds realistic, but the council knows you're part of the LPA, and the public knows that you're part of the LPA. But in the past, the idea has been that if you're taking this public role, you now have a public role, period. Not that you relinquish being a private person, but it's very hard to separate your. John voted in favor of Seagate. So if John went to the LPA and said, you know what, I voted in favor of this, even though the LPA voted against it, it would be, and I'm only here as John, I'm not here as an LPA member. That has happened in the past. And when it happened in the past, it was, no, you can't do that. That's just not right to do. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I have a
First
couple.
Amendment rights.
Yeah, First
Okay,
Amendment, but
gotcha.
also I may think differently too if John lived next door to Seagate. Because then he is going to be individually impacted by it, at which point he may have declared a conflict. But then again, the argument would be, is the gain or loss speculative? But I agree with Jim. I mean, First Amendment rights, you could.
I don't think the body can suppress an individual's right to go to council and make a statement.
Okay.
But is it the right thing to do?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
what are
different.
the optics? And so I think, as you heard today, there's what the letter of the law says, and then what's really needs to happen here within the letter of the law. I'm not saying
so
to
while we're on the
violate.
sunshine, Nancy, and that, about talking to each other, I guess I'm asking how that applies to directly with each other or indirectly. In the context I would give it is, several of us have gone on Beach Talk Radio and had conversations that people are listening to about topics. Obviously, we stay away from anything directly with what we're dealing with, but It's just a nuance that I'd like to get your reaction to about conversations that the other members are hearing that we're having about our opinions on things.
So, in the past, I worked for a jurisdiction. It happened to be a county. We had two county commissioners at a luncheon who walked outside together during this luncheon and had a conversation. And then there were allegations of sunshine violation. And there actually were criminal charges levied against both of them. And I think at the end of the day, they got out of it. I mean, there was, documentation, but then it's kind of like, well, this is what he said and this is what she said. And it's just not a situation you want to be in. So my advice has always been that if two of you or three of you are gathered together at a non-LPA function, that you still have a neutral person present to perhaps give testimony in the event that somebody did raise a sunshine violation challenge. And that person can say they were talking about that recipe. And in a small town, it's really difficult as well because everybody does know everybody. And if you don't go to these social events and be active in the community, people are concerned about your welfare and your health and where, how come I'm not seeing her? But to get to your question regarding statements made in other forums, we often draw the distinction, the matters that are brought to you. In fact, I mentioned it to Amy this morning. We're going to start putting parentheses, like if it's quasi-judicial or if it's legislative. Because if it's legislative, yes, you're going to be talking about it, but an individual's private property rights are not really at stake. In the quasi-judicial area, we are much more formal because your decision will impact that individual's private property rights, and those are protected by the U.S. Constitution as well as the Florida Constitution, and nobody wants to trample on private property rights. So that said, when you sit in a quasi-judicial forum that you do, you are coming with an open mind. You have not been biased in any way because you have to be an impartial decision maker. And you are making your decisions only on the evidence that is presented to you during that public hearing, not on things that you heard outside. Now, again, it's a small town, right? You're going to hear things. And if you don't, you might be more concerned. So that's why we do the ex parte disclosures. And then there is an opportunity for the individual or their representative to ask you a little bit more about that. I saw you go by that property 5 times. What were you looking at? Did you miss something the first time you went by? And those are all perfectly fine. And the reason for it is not to put you on the spot, but to make sure that you have not had a preconceived notion on how you're going to vote. Because otherwise, then why would we even have a hearing, right? If each one of you went out from some available media outlet and said, this is how I'm going to vote. So why even have the meeting, right? And Jim and I, we had that conversation. I think that there is an exception in the code as well, but it's for bias in in a quasi-judicial setting, that if, for instance, I'll use myself as an example, if an ex-husband came, which by the way, I don't have one, but if he came to the podium and I was a decision maker and, he really got me in that divorce settlement, I cannot be impartial. I know he perhaps doesn't say the truth all the time. That would be a basis. However, if you do that, guess what? They have the opportunity to inquire. So
that happens in a small town too, Nancy.
So I caution you, that issue doesn't really come up too much. It is in Florida statutes under the section on conflict of interest, which I think you guys have a handle on. So that was kind of a long answer to your question, but I think I hit some other points.
You did.
It was like when the intervener asked follow-up questions of me because of a discussion that I'd had with the applicant, which
it's fine.
Yeah.
Again, we are formal, yet we're informal. But some jurisdictions, it has to be, you know, I visited the site, I looked at the west side of the building, I looked from the street, I saw this, I didn't see where, you know, it is very, very involved. But again, it's the idea of fairness. And I think that based on your disclosures, the applicant has the opportunity to question you. I think that that instills a degree of fairness that would be upheld. Okay, so I think I answered your question and we'll move on.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so meeting procedures 254. We're going to follow the ethics rules in chapter 112, which is primarily the conflict. So there's a lot that was taken out because 112 is pretty comprehensive. Page 256, the order of the agenda. We added a couple things in there, changes to the agenda. I'm not sure if we have that in there now or not. But we kind of made these along the way. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. You know, Robert's Rules of Order, we can look to them for guidance if an issue comes up, but generally there's some sections that may conflict, which is stated there, and then we can just follow your proceeding. Then we've got the legislative hearing on page 257. I do want to point out on number 7, one of your important roles that you perform is to make a recommendation on consistency, and that's a requirement in Florida statutes, a finding on consistency. You make the recommendation and then ultimately the council finalizes that. So I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of that. And then of course, whether or not the application is in compliance with your code.
And reason for denial, simply enough, is that in our opinion, we do not believe it's consistent with the comprehensive plan.
You could do that. However, the applicant's going to want to know what
pieces and
policy.
parts. Okay.
Yeah. And think about it. It's fair.
Sure.
It's fair because this gives the applicant property owner an opportunity to go back and rethink and see what they could do to convert that denial to a approval. The reason for denial, we've kind of learned the hard way, with prejudice or without. We can add that in there.
What does that mean with prejudice and without? Can you explain that?
It has to do with timing. Go ahead.
Right. So without prejudice means that they could come back within a 6-month period. Judith, you're going to have to correct me if I'm wrong. If with prejudice would mean that they have to sit out an entire year. Right. So if you're denying it because it's just not quite right, but you want them to be able to come back with something similar, that's how it is. Okay, so quasi judicial. So we modified this a little bit to be consistent with your rules. Sometimes, as you know, I interrupt and for instance, I did it this morning. I asked the presenter if she was qualified as an expert previously, and she said, of course, yes, I was. And the only reason I do that is because sometimes if in the event there's an appeal, it's already stated in the record, and then we don't have to go forward and argue the point that, yes, she was an expert. Yes, she was providing expert testimony and her testimony was this, therefore it was competent substantial evidence. So when I jump in the middle, it's not my intent to be disrespectful of you or your proceedings. It's just I'm trying to make sure there's things in the record.
Well, I never take it that way, Nancy. I mean, I don't think anybody else does.
Helpful.
Yes.
Well, I try to keep my mouth shut, but it's hard. Okay, so the LPA meeting output. So this is on page 257. Oh, before I go on though, I do want to ask, is there any other questions regarding LPA? I mean, quasi-judicial?
No.
And again, I want to emphasize, as I explained earlier, staff, when they first come to the podium, they're giving you an overview, an introduction, because the burden is on the applicant who's coming and asking you to do something different than currently exists in the town. So they have to carry the burden and persuade you And then staff's going to come and give you a very neutral analysis based on the code. And then of course, rebuttal and closing comments. But that's a little bit of a shift. So,
Well, would you touch one more time then about the requirement to literally read the entire motion, or I'm sorry, the entire variance or whatever it happens to be, special exception, versus just having it as written, read into the record?
so it's important because you may have members of the public that are either watching or in the audience, and they may not have a copy of what staff's recommendation was.
Okay.
The fact that it's verbalized also affirms what is written, so there's no misunderstanding.
Okay.
So it is preferable to do it, but a lot of times never happens, and then we just deal with it. But having one of the things you guys kind of skip over a little bit is a motion to accept the agenda packet into your record. We can argue that it is part of the record because it was something you saw, it was something the applicant saw, but having that little line in there also helps. So
Okay.
we don't have
That's good
to,
for you. It's good for us, I'm sure.
avoid it. But if you have 10 quasi judicials waiting, we're going to shortcut some of the process.
Nancy, can I'm sorry, just, we're talking about the procedure of presentation. There are sometimes, not so many, but sometimes instances where the applicant is a homeowner and they need a small variance. In those cases, are you okay with staff doing more of the presenting? Because if it's a homeowner and they need a small variance, they may not have an attorney and a planner and all these people,
Sure.
to.
So if you want to role play that, you could still follow the sequencing. So we all kind of, know the order. So staff can get up and introduce it, have the applicant come up, and then defer immediately back to staff, and staff can then do the whole presentation.
Okay.
I need these variances to get my house back, to rebuild my house. Okay, thank you. And then staff can come in and go into the
Explain the
technical
yeah.
sides of
Good
it.
question.
Okay. All right. So trying to move us along here. I guess that's 259. Okay. So staff is going to report what actions were taken. Generally, if it's an ordinance, we put that in there, language in the whereas clauses, and we also use the word consistency because remember, that's one of your primary responsibilities under the code. But sometimes the chair shall sign a resolution evidencing the findings and decision-making and when the LPA has final agency action, and that would be for variances. And if you go on the town's website, you'll find that you can access any resolution that the LPA has adopted. And I think the rest is all pretty much deleted.
Good job.
So, well, it's a very simplistic thing, and we can start small, and over time, if you feel the need to add a few things, we can do that. It's somewhat difficult when you have the strike and insert, but it was there to show what was taken out.
I like that.
Thank you, Nancy.
So I would be looking for a motion to allow me to go ahead and finalize this, and then would you like us to include that in your agenda packet, or
Yes.
no, every meeting, or just give
No,
you
Oh, no.
just give you a
Just
copy
so
of
we-
it?
Yeah,
Yes, that would
Yeah.
be perfect.
Just
Less
one
is
clean.
more.
Less
So
is more.
moved.
Less is more.
Make it available.
Okay, so there's a motion to accept this by Jane. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Don. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Minor discussion. I did notice a misspelling, so
Oh, dear.
might check that.
Okay, misspelling where?
I saw 2 Ds after something with a EDD.
Okay, we'll look for it.
Now the whole thing's blown up.
Yeah.
No, no,
I
I
can't
I
support
want
this
to
document.
amend my second.
Amend that motion.
Amend that, yes.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Nobody's opposed. The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you.
Next, thank you, Nancy. Next item on the agenda is LPA members' items and reports. John, do you have anything?
I don't.
How about you, Jim?
No,
Jane?
I just want to bring this up because over Thanksgiving, I did a lot of cleaning on my street. And in bringing a lot of the junk off of the empty lots, I found 4 septic tanks that are open. And we put boards over them and things. And I did notify code and let them know, and they noticed them right away. Because, I mean, dogs, kids, people cutting through yards at night. I mean, if you end up in one of those holes, it is really yuck. And I
Easy.
just think, I think it's time that we need to get our streets clean again. And I would just like everybody to work with their neighbors and try to get people to help clean up, because it is really time.
Is there, were these abandoned septic tanks with the?
Well, what the code person said to me was when they cleared the lot, it had to be a machine that lifted that top off, because that's not something that's easily moved.
Got it.
And it was completely open, you know, it's like 7 feet long and 3 or 4 feet wide, and it, you know, definitely.
Is this something
scary.
that, where we notify the property owner that?
Yes, I told
that they
code
have to-
enforcement, they put a notice out, and
Yeah, because
Um,
that has to be, yeah.
yeah,
it's
we
pretty
put
dangerous.
boards over them on the street as neighbors, but we didn't have
Yeah.
enough boards to completely cover them. But at least it gives you some notice that you're gonna fall in, or there's something there.
Anything else, Jane?
No, no, I'll ask somebody.
Okay, Doug, anything?
No, ma'am.
How about you,
No, thank you.
None.
Jim? I don't have anything other than to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas.
ho, ho, ho.
Merry
Ho,
Christmas.
ho, ho. Nancy, anything else from you?
No, thank you all.
Judith, Jason, anything?
No.
Okay. What are the secret components of our next agenda? Do you know?
January 9th.
January 9th.
January 9th is the date. We're not sure yet. Is
Okay.
the-
Okay.
the short answer.
That's all right. Okay, well, if there is nothing else, it is 11:16 and
So moved.
thank you. There's a motion for
Second.
adjournment and we're adjourned at 11.